Hey guys, Jfarr here. This video will go through each electrical component and include their use within scenarios to help you understand how they are used in a practical application, building upon each other per scenario. There'll be timestamps so you can skip to each section. However, I would recommend watching the whole thing to build upon the information of the previous section. And on that note, let's get started. For our first scenario, our goal is simple. Build an always-on ceiling light system. For this, we will need a power source to provide the energy to the light, a battery to store the power when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, and finally a wiring tool to connect each piece together. Firstly, let's place down the ceiling light we want to use. Let's start by looking at each power source so we can pick the right one for the job. Starting the power sources off with the large solar panel. It's likely the first power source you'll craft and will generate a maximum of 20 power. The power output will vary depending on the position relative to the sun. The solar panel will also be affected by walls and objects that cast shadows on it, decreasing the overall effectiveness of the panel. However, this does not apply to other solar panels blocking each other. Make sure to keep the panels completely repaired as they lose efficiency when damaged. You can do this by using a hammer and 2 high quality metal to fully repair the item. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 115 scrap at a level 1 workbench, and when directly researching it at a research table it will cost 75 scrap. If you don't want to research it however, you can purchase it at the outpost for 75 scrap. The solar panel can be found within a default crate, sunken chest, oil rig scientist, and tunnel dweller. From here you can directly plug your devices into the solar panel's power output, however once the sun goes down all your power will stop. The wind turbine is a later game power source that has the chance to generate 150 power, which is 7.5 times more power compared to a single solar panel. However, the turbine depends on the wind speed to generate its power, which increases with higher altitudes. If you plan on building a wind turbine, make sure to place it up high, either on top of your base or on an extended platform to get the most out of it. Commonly, wind turbines are placed on top of stone frames filled with netting for cheap installation and easy access. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 520 scrap at a level 2 workbench, and when directly researched at a research table will cost 125 scrap. The wind turbine unlock path can be skipped by directly purchasing it from the bandit camp for 500 scrap. You can find wind turbines within lock crates, elite tier crates, military crates, excavator scientists, oil rig scientists, and heavy scientists. As the wind turbine does not suffer from power loss during the night, it is useful to continuously power your lights and batteries. Small generators are the most reliable source of power as they'll always output 40 power as long as they are filled with low grade fuel, but this now requires you to constantly fill it up to keep your devices online. This is not desirable if you plan on logging off for an extended period. The generator consumes 250 low-grade fuel per hour, meaning you'll need to come back to it every 2 hours to put another stack of low-grade fuel in. If you plan on building within a cave, the generator is essential as it will be the only way you will generate power underground. The generator, while essential in caves, should also be included within your base along with solar panels or turbines for backup energy generation. If a group decides to destroy your wind turbines or you're getting attacked during the night, you can turn on your generator within the base for guaranteed power generation. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 150 scrap at a level 2 workbench, and when directly researching it at a research table it will cost 75 scrap. The small generator's unlock path can be skipped by directly purchasing it from the outpost for 125 scrap. You can find small generators within lock crates, elite tier crates, military crates, normal crates, excavator scientists, oil rig scientists, and heavy scientists. For our scenario, we'll go with the solar panel as it's the easiest to craft and will do the job for powering our ceiling light. Once placed down, we're going to need a way to store the power in order to have an always-on ceiling light system. Batteries are your solution to powering devices throughout the day and night. There are 3 types of batteries ranging from small, medium, and large rechargeable batteries. The difference between each battery isn't just capacity and cost to craft, but also the maximum power it can output, which affects how many and what devices can be powered. An example I could give is if you have a small battery and want to place down and power an auto turret. The auto turret consumes 10 power, while the small battery can only output 10. This would completely fill the small battery's available output power, so you can't use it with other devices. If we were to swap it out for a medium battery that has a max output of 50 power, we'll now be able to power an auto turret and other components. Batteries will also keep their charge when picked up. This now means you can take fully charged batteries down into a cave base without needing to use a small generator. So you can charge up your batteries outside using a wind turbine and take it down and swap it out for an existing battery. Each battery tier will only be 80% efficient in the power it collects. This means if your solar panels are outputting 20 power, a battery will only be adding 16 power every minute. Also, to add to this, there is a limit of how much power a battery will accept as input. It appears to be 4 times its max power output capacity. So for a small battery, it can only charge at a maximum of 40 power per minute. So if you were to connect a windmill generating 60 power to a small battery, you would be losing generated power. The small battery's capacity is 150 RWM, which stands for rust watt minutes, and has a max power output of 10 power. When looking at the small battery, it will only take up a tiny amount of room, making it great for starter bases. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 40 scrap at a level 1 workbench, and when directly researching it at a research table, it will cost 20 scrap. The small battery can be found in sunken chests, crates, tunnel dwellers, oil rig scientists, and excavator scientists. Medium batteries have a capacity of 9,000 rust watt minutes, which is a 60 times increase over the small battery, and with a max power output of 50 power. The power nodes can be found on the back of the battery where the power box resides. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 75 scrap at a level 2 workbench, and when directly researching it at a research table, it will cost 75 scrap. The medium battery can additionally be purchased at the bandit camp for 75 scrap. The medium battery can be found within lock crates, elite tier crates, and military crates, along with additional containers. The large battery has a capacity of 24,000 rust watt minutes, which is a 2.6 times increase over the medium battery, and a max power output of 100 power. To put the max power output into context, one large battery could power 10 auto turrets. However, realistically it would be a bit less since splitting the components takes up some power. The tech tree's total path cost to unlock is 395 scrap at a level 2 workbench, and when directly researching it at a research table, it will cost 75 scrap. The large battery can be found within lock crates, elite tier crates, and military crates, along with additional containers. For our scenario, we'll use a small battery, as we currently only plan to store enough power to run a ceiling light when the sun isn't shining. With the battery down, we're going to need a way to wire the solar panel, battery, and ceiling light together. To wire everything together, we have the wiring tool, which is an essential item needed for connecting devices to power sources or to each other. Without the wiring tool, all electrical components are practically useless. You can use the wiring tool to view the stats of electrical components, power output at nodes, and the flow of electricity through the wire. Pull out your wiring tool and walk up to an electrical device such as a solar panel. From here you should see an output connection node, which you can press left click to create a wire extending from it. With the wiring formed, you can run it along the ground, wall, or directly to the device through the air. The wire will only finish a connection once you have reached the input of the receiving device, such as our battery, and press left click on the input node. To remove a connection, either hold right click when building the wire or walk up to the input node and hold right click. You can also change the color of the wire by holding out the tool and holding R. The wiring tool is a default blueprint and requires a level 1 workbench to craft. We now have power flowing from the solar panel to the battery. We now want to connect our ceiling light's input directly to the output of our battery. With the connection complete, the power will now flow from the solar panel to the battery and to the ceiling light. We have now successfully completed the first scenario of an always-on ceiling light and learnt the basics of power sources, batteries, and the wiring tool. For the next scenario, we may want to toggle the ceiling light on or off without needing to unplug the wire to it every time. For this, we'll need a simple electrical on-off switch. The switch consumes one power and acts as a simple toggle between on and off. All devices connected to the switch's output will be dependent on if it's turned on or off. This will be great for our ceiling light, as we may want to turn it off during the day to save power. Place down the switch on the wall that's convenient to reach. Now go to your battery's output and remove the connection to your light. Connect the battery's output to the switch's input, and the switch's output to the ceiling light. Now your flow of power is going through the switch. You can now successfully toggle it on or off. For the third scenario, we'll now want to power multiple ceiling lights, which will require us to understand how to send out power from the ceiling light, splitters, and root combiners for combining multiple power sources, since we should get extra solar panels and batteries. Firstly, we can send out the power from our originally placed ceiling light to other nearby sources by accessing its pass-through node. This will allow you to use a single cable and chain together as many lights or electricals as you like. But now we'll need another battery and solar panel to store additional energy for the night. The extra ceiling lights won't really be a problem, however we should start expanding so we can power other electronics. We could just connect one solar panel to one battery, however this won't scale well in the future when we have more power sources or larger batteries. What we will do is combine the power from all our solar panels and distribute it to the batteries. Let's start by understanding how to combine the power from our newly placed solar panel. Starting off, we have the root combiner. This combiner is especially useful when building multiple solar panels or batteries and want to chain them together so you can have their power available in just one cable. However, we can use a single root combiner and combine both solar panels into one cable, which now holds the total power of the two solar panels. The splitter is used to equally divide the power from a single cable to multiple cables. It can also be used in scenarios where you would want to power multiple devices from a single battery without having to chain them together from your light. In our scenario, we can place down the splitter and bring the output of our root combiner into the input of the splitter. We'll now have the three output nodes we can branch off from. We'll want to use the first two to connect with our batteries. If you only use two outputs, it will split your power in half. If you use the three outputs, it will split your power into thirds. The splitter will also consume one power, meaning the batteries will be receiving slightly less power. We'll now have to combine the power of both our batteries back into one wire. Place down a second root combiner before the switch and link up the batteries to the root combiner and root combiner to switch. We have now successfully combined the power of our new solar panels and equally split that power between our batteries. Our newly placed lights will now continue to run throughout the night. For the fourth scenario, we'll now want the ceiling lights to automatically turn on during the night and off during the day, without us needing to manually use the switch. For this, we'll need a blocker and electrical branch component. The blocker works by preventing the pass-through of power while it receives power through its second input. This means if we have a solar panel generating power during the day, it will prevent the pass-through of power, stopping the lights. Next is the electrical branch. This is similar to the splitter and breaks up the single wire into two separate nodes, which can power multiple things. However, unlike the splitter which equally divides the power up between each output, the electrical branch allows you to set how much power goes out of its branch node. This can be used instead of the splitter to split off the main line by a set amount, such as 10 power for each turret, therefore keeping your main line filled with power. Firstly, remove the connection between the root combiner which combines the power of both our solar panels and the splitter. Now place the electrical branch down and wire the root combiner's output to the electrical branch's input. Now connect the electrical branch's main power output to the splitter like we originally had. All this does is allows us to branch off the combined solar panel's power into another wire. This is the wire we'll use to detect if it's day or night. Now place down the blocker after the second root combiner, which combines the power from our batteries. We should now remove the switch with our hammer since this will be automated. Wire the root combiner into the blocker's power input. You can now connect the electrical branch's second output to the blocker's block pass-through node. Now connect the blocker's output node to the ceiling lights. All this system is essentially doing is blocking the power to the ceiling lights when it receives power through the wire connected to the solar panels. We've now successfully integrated and set up an automatic light system into our scenario. We would now like to have outside lights that toggle between the inside lights and outside lights. We might want to do this if we have to go out at night and want to be able to easily see our front door to make sure no one is camping it. We will need a pressure plate and a memory cell. Pressure plates output power when they have been triggered by a player standing on them. They first require at least one power within the input node, and in our case will be used to send out power to a memory cell to trigger an event. Now let's have a look at memory cells. When the set node receives power, it will set the memory cell to true, and power will flow through its output node. When the reset node receives power, it will set the memory cell back to false, flowing the power back through its default inverted output node. So if set is triggered, the cell will stay on state true and only return to state false when the reset is triggered. The toggle node essentially combines the set and reset into a single node. So when it first receives the power, it will set the state to true. Then if it loses power and receives power again, it will reset the state back to false. Firstly, I'll show you the messy way using the set and reset nodes and clean it up at the end using the toggle node. Place down 2 pressure pads, one outside and one inside. Now make sure to power the pressure pads. We can do this by using 2 electrical branches to split the power to the memory cell and pressure pads. Place the first electrical branch down to split the power so you have your main line going to the memory cell and 2 extra power going to a second electrical branch. The second branch will further split this power for both pressure pads to use. Now to put the memory cell to practical terms. We can connect an inside pressure pad's output to the memory cell's reset node, and the outside pressure pad to the memory cell's set node. Then connect the inside lights to the inverted output node and the outside lights to the output node. We can clean this up by only using a single pressure pad by using the memory cell toggle node. We can remove the outside pressure pad and connect your single inside pressure pad's output into the memory cell toggle node. It's time to log off, but we're worried people might offline raid us and need a way to stop the raiders before they blow through our walls. We'll now need to set up a random door opening system that will continue to loop through and randomly open a door throughout the night. This might make raiders think there is someone inside to help prevent an offline raid. The new items we'll need is a rand component, door controller, and timer. This system will get a little complicated, so we'll explain each part and tie it all together at the end. There are essentially 3 parts to this system, which is the input power, the loop, and random output power. The rand switch works by randomly becoming true and outputting power, or false and stopping the output of power when the set node receives power. The randomness may be good for building puzzle rooms, or in our case making it sound like or look like someone is inside. Next is a door controller, which will open or close the closest door when it receives power. You'll need to make sure you connect the controller to the door before using it. Finally, we have a timer, which outputs power throughout a given duration when triggered. It can be used as a typical switch or toggled when it receives power. Firstly, place down an electrical branch before the blocker so it can run at all times. Let's set it up with the splitter so it's easier to understand, and later switch it over to electrical branches so we can save some power. Make sure to set the branch power amount to at least 16, since that's what all the components will require. The first branch will be so we can continue to have the main power line for our lights and other electricals, while the branch line will be for our door opening loop. Now place down a splitter so we can equally split the power for the door loop branch. Place down a switch, timer, and rand switch and give them each power from the 3 output nodes on the splitter. I will also add a light above the rand module so we can test to see if it's working. Now connect the switch output node to the timer's toggle node. This will cause the timer to start ticking when we turn on the switch. Now if you directly input this into the rand module's set node and pull the switch, we can manually cause the light to randomly turn on and off. However, this is not an automated system and we'll need to create some kind of loop. Instead of connecting the timer directly to the rand module, place down an electrical branch above it and insert the output of the timer to the branch's input. Now connect the branch's node to the rand module, and we'll use the other electrical branch's output node for the loop. We'll also want to remove the switch's wire going directly into the splitter. We'll need to place down a blocker above the switch and plug it directly to the splitter, so the power is only sent out when it isn't being blocked. Now connect the electrical branch's output node to the blocker's block pass-through node. Finally, attach the blocker's output node to the switch's input node. So now when we pull the switch, it will send out power to the timer and start it ticking down. While the timer is ticking, it would output power to the branch. The branch will send this to the RAN switch and cause it to be true or false. The branch will also send this power to the blocker, causing the blocker to activate and block power to the switch, even though the switch is still in the turned on position. Since the switch is no longer sending out power, the timer will no longer receive power, as well as the branch. Now the branch isn't sending out power to the blocker's pass-through node, causing power to flow through and power the switch, allowing the timer to turn back on and continue the loop. We can now place down and connect a door controller next to the door we want to randomly open. Wire the RAN switch's module node to the door's controller input node. The system now works, but it is inefficient. Since we're using a splitter, all nodes are receiving equal power, when in reality, some should receive less than others. Remove the splitter and place down 2 electrical branches. Set the first branch to branch out 2 power and connect that branch's line to the RAN switch. The RAN switch will consume 1 power and output 1 power to the door controller. Now connect the electrical branch's main output node to the second electrical branch's input. Now branch off 3 power for our blocker to use. The blocker will consume 1 power, send to the switch 2 power, the switch will consume 1 power and send the remaining 1 power to the timer. Now connect the main output node of the second electrical branch to the timer's input node. This will contain the remaining power necessary for the timer, electrical branch, blocker trigger and RAN trigger. You can now return to the original branch of the main power line and change its branch amount from 16 to 12, since our new system is more efficient. We now have a successful random door opening system to hopefully scare off any raiders. I think it's time we upgrade our storage and power generation. We'll need to swap out our small batteries and add a wind turbine on top of our existing solar panels. Firstly, place down a wind turbine at the highest point of your base. It's even recommended to build a tower for it. However, in this scenario, I will just place it down in the ceiling. Now head down and pick up the small batteries and place down a medium battery. We'll now need to use one solar panel as the day-night cycle detector and won't be able to combine it with the wind turbine and other panel before the battery. If we combine them, the day-night system wouldn't work as the turbine would always generate power. You also can't connect an electrical branch to a root combiner as it isn't a power source. Remove the connection to the branch from the combiner and connect one of the solar panels directly to the electrical branch. Now remove the connection from the electrical branch to the splitter. We can now access this single solar panel's power if we need to fill another battery. So we'll do just that. Place down a small battery next to the medium battery and connect the branch's output node to the small battery. Now connect your wind turbine to the spare root combiner node. Make sure to remove the splitter component as we'll no longer need it for just a single medium battery. Connect the final root combiner's main line, which contains all of our power, into the medium battery's input. Now remove all but one root combiner after the battery so we can connect the medium battery and single small battery back up into one wire. We've now successfully upgraded our power system to be overall more efficient and future-proof. Now I would like it if the inside and outside lights didn't always switch when I walk inside or outside at night. We can do this by including an AND switch. The AND switch works by only sending out power when it receives power from 2 separate sources. In this example, we'll connect a switch and our pressure pad to the AND switch. When we toggle the switch on, it will provide power to the AND switch, leaving the pressure pad as the final component to send out power to the AND switch and switch the lights. For our scenario, place down the AND switch before the memory cell toggle node and connect the pressure pad wire to one of the AND switch's input nodes. Now place and connect a switch to the second AND switch input node and power the switch from the main line. Finally, connect the AND switch's output node to the memory cell's toggle node. We've now successfully modified our system to only toggle between the lights when we have the light switch toggle activated. Let's say we want to add another door on the other side of our base and want to include some additional lights we manually want to control outside of the day-night system we set up. However, now we have 2 doors on either side of the base and want to have a switch on either side to turn on or off the lights. This might seem simple enough, but we run into a problem if we were to leave one of the switches on. Now if we attempt to turn the light switch on or off from the other side of the base, it will have no effect, since the other switch is always providing power. The XOR switch can solve this and will become especially useful on larger bases. The XOR switch works by allowing electricity to flow through its output node when it receives power from only one of its input nodes. If it receives power from both nodes, it will block the electrical flow. This means we can set it up so each switch is connected to a separate XOR switch input node. If one of the switches is turned on, it will provide power. But now if you flick the second switch, the lights will turn off, since both switches are providing power, causing the XOR switch to block the flow of power. Firstly, we'll need to place down the two switches on either doorway and connect them up to some power. Now place down the XOR switch in a suitable location and connect both doorway switches to each input node of the XOR switch. Now connect the output of the XOR switch to our new manual lights. We now have a light system in place that can be manually controlled from multiple switches across the base, without conflicting with each other. For our final scenario, we want a warning system to tell us or our teammates to not leave the house. We might want to do this if there is someone camping the door or want a visual way of indicating to our teammates the current situation. We want this system triggered for either a person being detected out the front of our base or a teammate has manually flicked a switch to sound the alarm and there may be enemies nearby. This may be useful in larger bases or villages with lots of people, or players who aren't always on Discord with whoever they're living with. For this, we'll need an XOR switch, heartbeat sensor, and siren light. The heartbeat sensor sends out power if it detects a player in a 3.5 square radius. However, it needs line of sight. The sensor has an output node that sends out one power and acts as a trigger. Do not try and power multiple devices with the heartbeat sensor's output node. We'll instead need to work with the memory cell again if we want to achieve our scenario. The XOR switch works by sending out power if either one of its input nodes receives power. We can set this up so it triggers the alarm if either the heartbeat sensor detects a player or the switch has been flicked. Firstly, place down the siren light above the door and the XOR switch nearby. Connect the XOR switch's output directly to the siren light's input. Now with the XOR switch down, we need two ways to trigger the light. Our first way will be manually using the switch. Now connect the output power from the switch directly to the XOR switch and connect it to the power system. We can now toggle the siren with the switch, but we want a second way to trigger it. Go outside and place your heartbeat sensor down. Make sure it has a line of sight with anyone camping your door. Branch out power to the heartbeat sensor so it can turn on. Now the sensor will send out and trigger every time someone walks in its line of sight. You can toggle the modes of the heartbeat sensor to make sure it only triggers for players that don't have tool cupboard access. Now we need to convert this trigger into a constant power stream so the siren light remains on. We'll need a memory cell to flip to either true or false depending on if someone is detected. Now place down an additional branch and memory cell near the XOR switch. Branch off some power to the memory cell input and reset node. We want the memory cell to constantly reset if it's not detecting anyone and only set when it receives power through its set node. This is where we'll connect the heartbeat sensor's output. Now connect the memory cell to the XOR switch's input node. We now have it set up so when a player walks in front of the heartbeat sensor, it'll trigger and send out one power. The memory cell will receive this one power and set itself to true and output power through its output node. The XOR switch will get this power and send it to the alarm. Now if either player is detected or a switch is flicked, the siren light will turn on. There are many more devices and components that use electricity that didn't make it into this video, but deserves their own videos such as the trap items, receivers, and smart devices. However, hopefully you enjoyed this video and I could clear some things up on how to get started with the electricity system. Look out for future videos which will showcase the smart devices and mobile app, traps such as the auto turret or Tesla coil, and many more. If you enjoyed, a like or sub would be appreciated. Thanks guys for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.